He's not a figment of your imagination. Here's your look at the Hasbro Marvel Legends Spider-Man Classic Wave. This is Marvel's Mysterio. A cloud of smoke heralds the arrival of the villainous mastermind who uses the art of illusion against Spider-Man, Mysterio. Before we get a closer look at Mysterio, let's get this guy clocked in to see how tall he actually stands. Now, I know these figures have been around for a bit. Now, I know a little behind having a look at these, but I always did want to start getting back into collecting Marvel Legends, specifically the Spider-Man Classics wave, specifically Mysterio, because Mysterio is my favorite all-time Spider-Man villain. So, you know, sooner or later I was going to have a look at these. Taking the tape measure, though, to the very top of Mysterio's domed head, I'm going to stop it right there. According to the readouts, Mysterio stands 6.6 inches in height. We can switch that to centimeters, revealing that Mysterio is 16.8 centimeters tall. For accessories, the figure would include what the packaging would tout as Hypnotic Mist. What exactly is Hypnotic Mist, you may ask? It's these side-accompanying plastic constructs that are going to clamp around the figure's legs. We'll have a look at those right now. Starting first with this one. And one thing I do like about these is that they are unique to one another. They're not simply just using the same mold and flipping it around. This one, as you can see, again, is made of a translucent turquoise blue. But you can see that there's an arm of an octopus, complete with little suction cups on the inside. There's all these nice little bubbled effects that they've added along these little spiral hooks. Really does work out well to be a nice little construct, a little mist that you can put around the figure's legs. Now, there is a little opening right here. And you know when you're parting around the figure's legs that the whole bottom part here is flat. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's completely smooth to the touch. That'll be your indicator as to which way this goes onto the figure's legs. Then you've got the other one right here, which is similar and yet still different. If you look at the two, one is sort of designed to go sideways. One is designed to kind of go and stretch up the side of his leg. Different enough and yet still same. You can see there the bubbling effect, and you've got the little spirals along the top. Really neat little constructs. Again, here's the bottom flat section here. So this basically sits upright like this. And here's the flat section right here. This basically sits like this. If you look at the openings on the bottom here, see how this little section here opens up? This little section here opens up. What you're going to do is just take this and clamp this around the figure's legs. Assuming that's where they're supposed to go, they just clamp on the one side like that. And then you're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Just clamp it around. The one thing that these actually do aid in doing with Mysterio is it gives him much needed additional stability when it comes to his legs. Mysterios are always been known, let's just get that to be flat on the ground. There we go. Mysterios are always really known for being top heavy. One of the big problems to that is the fact that he's got really dense, heavy cape that sits the majority of the back of his torso. And then he also has that big, giant fish tank head helmet, which of course all adds up to a figure that all the time seems to fall over. This one being the included example. A good thing about it, having these little side constructs like this, is not only does it add a little bit of shelf appeal when you're displaying your Mysterio for yourself, but it also means that it's going to make him a little more stable, sort of filling in for a makeshift display stand. That being said, let's get a closer look here at Mysterio. It's your traditional classic design of Mysterio outfits. So that green grid costume, for example, the big giant gold gauntlet arms, and of course the big giant gold boots. Not to mention this big giant fishbowl tank head that he has for his helmet. Really does translate to a very classic designed Mysterio. Now again, one of the big problems when it comes to these figures is the fact that they always have big giant capes. He's got a big dense plastic cape that really never stays properly in place. You can see how the peg is supposed to, in theory, go into that supplied peg hole on the back of his torso, but it really never does stay in place. One of the things that they also incorporate to this figure that really does bother me a lot is the fact that they do build it so that you have a removable helmet. What you do is you're supposed to detach it from the torso, just like that, which is super easy. And then you're basically just going to lift it. Now, I find it helps to lift it forward, kind of turn it like this, and then you can pop this off, revealing sort of a very generic looking head underneath, all done in that same translucent turquoise plastic as those mist constructs that we looked at earlier. I mean, the head sculpt isn't terrible, But I really asked the question, did it even need to be there in the first place? Instead, I would have been fined for the idea if they actually had just put a peg, like a ball peg, on the top of the head, the neck, and just attached it to the head where you could have had a little bit of posability. I really don't like the idea of having a removable dome and cape, certainly as one piece. I mean, it's fine for some. I'm just not a big fan of it myself. I don't really want to know who's underneath the dome, even though we all know who's underneath the dome. I like to keep that a surprise. I like to keep Mysterio a mystery. So for me, it's fine and good that they included it. One of the downsides, though, is not only does it doesn't really sit properly on his torso, of course with the cape, but he also has this big gap right here, where this piece obviously isn't attached to his torso, because they had to allot for a little bit of clearance so you could actually remove the helmet properly. It means that there's a big gaping gap between his torso and the top of the cape. And there's really no way to fix that either. It always sits really super loose. I mean, I guess you could say he's got a little bit of posability just by the fact that you're literally just rotating it back and forth on the shoulders. But for me, I would have been fine just if they had permanently attached the cape and permanently attached the head to the rest of his body. Just leave it alone. Don't give me the gimmick of having a removable head. I really don't like that. I like Mysterio just always having the dome. It's either that, or a lot of times they make the dome see-through so you can see the face straight through, and I don't like that either. I mean, as for at least crediting to the figure, I do like the fact that they went with this pearl-colored for the dome, so much so that you can't actually even see through it. Short of you actually just looking underneath the dome, or peeking underneath like we're currently doing right now, there's really no way of actually knowing what that head sculpt looks underneath that. And I like the mysteriousness and the intrigue of not knowing what the face actually looks like. So I like the fact that it masks everything. You can't see, even as much as you try, you can't even look straight through there. I mean, you see nothing. All you're literally seeing is my studio lights just reflecting off the surface of the plastic. It's just a shame, like, this had to be a separate piece. Of all the things, it had to be a separate piece, because really, the reveal in all of this is, I feel, a little underwhelming. I don't want to see, like, a translucent head underneath all that. So, of course, that does mean it sacrifices a little bit when it comes to moving the figure. Everything you're moving on the figure, every single time you're doing it, I feel like it just lifts the cape off, and it never stays in place. It can be fine, you know, they can go ahead and try to put that peg in fine and good to get the peg to stay properly into that hole, but it never stays in place. Who are we kidding? Every time you put that in, as quickly as you turn the figure, it's going to be popping off again. Let's talk about other things at least I like about this. Of course, you got the grid patterning here on the green of his costume. They have gone in and dark washed that to fill in those little recessed crevices. There are a few little areas where it looks a little on the muddier side, like here on the sides, but I guess you could say if it looks closer to being comic accurate, because again, it's got the darker shadowing there, and it's everywhere. Anywhere there is a green surface of plastic, there's a little bit of dark wash that's been applied to it. So, like, again, those details do stand out. His costume is pretty simple, really, when you think about it. Short of the very elaborate-looking gloves and the elaborate-looking metallic boots, all the rest of his costume is basically just this grid patterning. And I think adding a little bit of dark wash definitely went a long way versus just leaving it completely off altogether. I do like the detailing that they added to the gloves, for example. And these are actually carved in there. This isn't just painted in place. I think they did put a good level amount of sculpting in there. And equally so, I do like the fact that they added that metallic gold as opposed to going with a very matte yellow. Boy, does that ever look sharp. Unfortunately, again, when you're looking at the pegs are unavoidable. I mean, they could have either gone in there and painted the gold over top of it, and then ultimately it just would have meant that anytime you bend the hand, this would have just chipped the paint off. Instead, they went with a close enough proximity of what the same coloring of plastic is. It's not terrible. It stands out, but it could have been, I think, a lot worse had they gone with like green, or had they gone with black, or certainly a lot darker of a color. The hands are already gestured in basically a pose, perfect for Mysterio. Again, where it looks like he's summoning around the hypnotic spirits and mist around him. I think that works really well. I don't really think he needs to have swappable hands, for example. We get a little bit lower down on the legs. Now, unfortunately, I've got loose legs on this figure. That's only my figure, and I'm sure it's not going to be everybody's. But I have to point out the fact that right out of the packaging, he's really loose. This one leg more so. This leg isn't so much the issue, but this leg right here is super, super loose. Do you like the gold that they have added to the boots? Similar, of course, to the same coloring as his gloves, and similar to the little eye clips that he uses for his cape. All come together really nicely for a classic styling-looking Mysterio. Let's go ahead and talk about the articulation on the figure. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and just lift this off for the time being. It's the only time I'm going to be doing this, only to show you that there is articulation. for the defaulted head underneath here, even though I'm not crazy about it. I do appreciate at least the fact that they give us a ball joint and fully functioning head, even though it's not something I'm ever going to really see on the figure. He does have an upper torso crunch, standard waist swivel for these figures. His arms go out at a full 90-degree angle bend. It always seems to be the case that this one arm always seems tighter on this side. Every single time I look at a Marvel Legends, it seems like this side is looser than this side right here. But he does have the arms, of course, that allow him to rotate those all the way around. You can swivel at the bicep. He has a double hinge on the elbow. He has hand articulation. At least I thought he had hand articulation. Maybe he doesn't. It's just molded in there. But he does have certainly hand articulation here. You can swivel those all the way around, and you can also hinge them back and forth. As for his legs split out, a normal standard bit of articulation on Marvel Legends figures. You can bring the legs forward and back perfectly fine. He has a swivel 3/4 of the way up the thigh that allows the lower leg to rotate all the way around. He does have a double hinge on the knee. Doesn't have any articulation on the boot. At least it doesn't seem like he does. And he also has articulation in the foot, back and forth, ankle pivot going this way as well. Now I ask you, how many people are going to be likely displaying their figure like this? Sure, fine, it's good. They give you a little bit of a reveal underneath that. But if any bit of a fan out there of Mysterio, you're going to be going the route I'm going to be going and permanently displaying the figure with the dome. Of course, it involves a really hard to peg into place cape that never stays properly in place. And again, you have to sacrifice a little bit of the fact that he does have the removable dome by giving a big, very obvious gap between the top of the head and the rest of his body. That's unavoidable. At least it translates to a pretty good-looking Mysterio on the shelf on display. We get ourselves a classic-looking Mysterio with some nice little constructs that you can clip around his legs. Clipping those around his legs certainly, like I said, do come in handy because the figure does have some difficulty standing. If you just get him on a defaulted stance, his cape seems to be really back-heavy, and his dome seems to add on to that. So I would definitely encourage, if you are picking this figure up for yourself, a little late to the game, I suppose, when picking up this figure, definitely use these little mist constructs. Clip them around his legs, and at least, as you can see, it guarantees the figure, prevents the figure from falling over. One of the earliest rules they'll teach you in advertising is to keep things simple. You don't want to overcomplicate the product because it will alienate consumers. Now, when you look at Mysterio here, on paper, it looks great as a classic-looking, styling Mysterio, and yet they had to complicate the matter by having a removable dome and cape. Some people, I'm sure, have asked for that. Some people would say to themselves, I would love to get a Mysterio that actually had removable dome and cape. Not this guy. Not this guy. Keep it simple. I would have been fine and good if they had just kept the cape and the dome permanently attached to his head, just via a ball joint. Instead, what we end up getting left with is a cape that never really sits properly onto his torso. The whole gimmick is the fact that you can remove the dome and the cape and you get underneath that a really underwhelming head sculpt. Really, it doesn't look like it even belongs to Mysterio. It looks like just a regular stock head that they molded in the same turquoise translucent plastic that comes included with his Hypnotic Mist. Hypnotic Mist is a nice touch. The removable dome with the underwhelming head sculpt underneath wasn't really necessary. It still means, though, you have a Mysterio that looks good on paper, looks good on display, just with a slightly floppy cape because it never really stays properly in place. The figure does have some difficulty standing, but that seems to be the case across the board when it comes to all Mysterios. Every Mysterio I've had in my collection always has at some point some difficulty standing, just because it's the nature of the game. It's the nature of the beast. He has a big, giant, plastic, heavy cape, and he has a big, giant dome on his head. And because of that, it means the figure's going to have some difficulty standing up. At least, Hasbro, in this case, threw in some constructs that not only from a practical standpoint guarantee the figure's going to be standing properly, but from a cosmetic standpoint, gives a little extra pizzazz to Mysterio when you have him on display. You get that little bit of mist action going around his legs. So overall, I like the look of Mysterio. I don't like the construction of Mysterio because I really don't think he ever should have had a removable head and dome and cape. There, I said it. I'm going to leave it be. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. Also, if you're new to this channel and you're liking all the content you're seeing, consider the idea of hitting the subscribe button down below. turning the bell notification on, and by all means, come back to this channel on a Monday to Friday basis, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's when we do it. That's how we do it here. Rice Krispie Squares, brisk iced tea, as much snacks and drinks as you could possibly take are always here during our premieres, Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come back to this channel, keep your peepers peeled. Lots more Marvel Legends reviews coming your way. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.